I'm Samantha Reynolds, 34, and I catch financial criminals for a living. Last Tuesday, my phone pinged with a credit alert. My score had plummeted 150 points overnight. 3 hours of frantic calls revealed a $90,000 loan in my name for a home renovation I never authorized. My hands trembled as I stared at the signature on the digital documents. It wasn't mine, but I recognized it instantly. My sister Heather had forged my name, not knowing that identity theft is literally what I investigate at work every day. Before I dive into this nightmare drop, a comment telling me where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been blindsided by family betrayal. Trust me, this story has twists you won't believe. Growing up, Heather and I were inseparable. Just 3 years apart, we shared clothes, secrets, and dreams. I was always the protective older sister, the one who scared away the neighborhood bullies and helped her with homework. Our childhood photos show us with matching gap-toothed grins, arms wrapped tightly around each other. I truly believed nothing could ever come between us. As we entered adulthood, our paths diverged dramatically. I was always the practical one, focused on education and building a stable future. I worked part-time jobs through college to minimize student loans and earned my degree in criminal justice, followed by a master's in financial forensics. Heather, on the other hand, dropped out of community college after 1 semester, claiming it was too boring for her creative spirit. While I was building my career at the Treasury Department and eventually landing a position at the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN Heather bounced between retail jobs, never staying anywhere longer than 6 months. Her Instagram portrayed a glamorous life of brunches, shopping sprees, and vacations she clearly couldn't afford. I worried about her mounting credit card debt, but whenever I tried to discuss it, she'd laugh it off. "Not everyone wants to live like a nun," she'd say. "Life's too short to worry about credit scores." When Heather met Richard 3 years ago, I initially hoped he might be a stabilizing influence. He had a good job in real estate development and seemed ambitious. My hopes were quickly dashed when I realized he encouraged her worst tendencies. Instead of helping her develop financial responsibility, he fueled her spending habits with gifts and exotic trips. Their wedding was an extravagant affair that I later discovered was financed entirely on credit. There were warning signs I chose to ignore. The time she borrowed my credit card for an emergency car repair, only for me to find $800 in charges from Nordstrom. Or when she asked to use my address for some mail because she and Richard were between apartments, which resulted in collection notices arriving at my door. Each time I confronted her. Each time she had an excuse, followed by tearful apologies and promises to do better. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Sam," she'd say, hugging me tightly. "You're the only one who's always been there for me." And I believed her because I wanted to. Because she was my sister, and I remembered the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. My recent promotion at FinCEN came with increased responsibilities investigating complex financial fraud schemes. The irony isn't lost on me now. While I was tracking down sophisticated criminal networks at work, I completely missed the fraud happening in my own family. Our parents didn't help matters. Mom and Dad always treated Heather like she needed extra protection. When we were kids, she got away with everything while I was held to higher standards. "Be patient with your sister," Mom would say. "She's sensitive. Not everyone can be as strong as you." This dynamic continued into adulthood. When I expressed concerns about Heather's financial habits, my parents dismissed them. "She's just enjoying her youth," Dad would say. "Stop being so uptight, Samantha." Even after discovering smaller financial betrayals, I continued helping Heather. I created budget spreadsheets she never used. I offered to consolidate her credit card debt at a lower interest rate. I even co-signed her apartment lease when her credit wasn't sufficient, something my financial training screamed against. Last Christmas, I noticed Heather going through my home office while everyone else was watching football. When I asked what she was doing, she claimed to be looking for aspirin. I thought nothing of it at the time. Now I realize that was probably when she gathered the personal information she needed: my social security number, copies of my ID, and details about my excellent credit history. What I couldn't understand as I stared at that fraudulent loan document was why now? Why would she risk our relationship for $90,000? What desperation drove her to this level of betrayal? Little did I know I was about to uncover a pattern of deception far deeper than I ever imagined. My training kicked in as the initial shock subsided. I've spent years following money trails and documenting financial crimes. Now I needed to apply those skills to my own case. My dining room transformed into an investigation headquarters laptop open to multiple spreadsheets as I methodically built my case. First, I pulled comprehensive credit reports from all three bureaus. The fraudulent loan had been issued by Atlantic Coastal Bank, an institution I'd never used. I called their fraud department and requested all documentation related to the application. "We'll need you to complete an identity theft affidavit," the representative explained. "But I can tell you the loan was approved 3 weeks ago and funds were dispersed to a joint account. Can you give me the account details?" I asked, my investigator instincts taking over. "I'm sorry, but that would require a subpoena," she replied. Of course it would. The loan application had been submitted online with scans of my driver's license and social security card. The loan officer conducted the closing via video call, where someone, presumably Heather wearing a dark wig, posed as me. Atlantic Coastal's security protocols were concerning, but that was a problem for another day. The stated purpose of the loan was home renovation for an address I immediately recognized as Heather and Richard's house. They'd been talking about a major kitchen and master bath remodel for months. Apparently, they'd decided to fund it with my identity. I found the contractor's estimate in public records. $85,000 for a luxury renovation, including imported marble countertops, custom cabinetry, and a steam shower. The additional $5,000 had been transferred to Heather and Richard's personal checking account. My sister had always been careless with sensitive documents, and this time it worked in my favor. Using her email address, I was able to reset the password to their shared cloud storage, since she always used the same password, our childhood dog's name, and her birth year. Inside, I found a folder labeled Home Reno containing all the loan documents and evidence that Richard was fully aware of the fraud. "Are you sure this is safe?" Heather had asked in a text message to Richard that had been screenshot and stored in the folder. "Stop worrying," he'd replied. "Sam makes 6 figures and has perfect credit. She'll never even notice, and if she does, we'll be done with the renovations." What's she going to do? Send her own sister to jail? Besides, we'll pay it back eventually. My hands shook with rage as I called Heather, ready to confront her directly. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. I sent a text, "I know about the loan. We need to talk immediately." 3 hours later, my phone rang. It was my mother, her voice tight with anger. "What terrible things have you been saying to your sister?" she demanded. "Heather is absolutely hysterical. Mom, she committed identity theft. She took out a $90,000 loan in my name without my knowledge or consent." "That's ridiculous," Mom scoffed. "Why would she do that when she and Richard are doing so well? You've always been jealous of her, Samantha." My jaw dropped. "Jealous, Mom? I can prove what she did. I have the documents. Richard explained everything. You offered to help with their renovation because you're doing so well financially. Now you're changing your mind and threatening your own sister. She showed us your text, and quite frankly, it sounds like you're having some kind of breakdown." The realization hit me like a physical blow. Heather had gotten ahead of the story. Before I could present my evidence, she had painted me as unstable and jealous to our parents, and probably the rest of the family too. I tried calling my father next, then my cousin Grace, and finally my Aunt Patricia. None of them picked up. Within hours, I discovered I'd been blocked on social media by most of my family members. Messages sent to our family group chat went unanswered. That night, I received an email from Richard. The subject line, legal notice. Samantha, your false accusations against Heather constitute defamation and are causing her extreme emotional distress. If you continue harassing my wife with these fabricated claims, we will have no choice but to pursue legal action. I strongly advise you to seek professional help for whatever issues are causing this behavior. I stared at the screen, anger giving way to cold determination. They thought I was an easy target. They had no idea who they were dealing with. While they were playing family politics, I was gathering financial records, documenting the fraud, and building a case that would stand up in court. The next morning, I discovered something even more disturbing. While analyzing the digital application process, I found that the email used for the loan belonged to Richard, not Heather. Further digging revealed his name associated with 3 other loan applications using different identities over the past year. My sister wasn't just a participant in this fraud. She was married to a serial identity thief, and now I was his latest victim. As I dug deeper, the betrayal grew more profound. What I had initially believed was an isolated incident, a desperate sister making a terrible mistake, was revealing itself as something far more calculated. Using my professional contacts, I quietly ran Heather's name through databases not available to the general public. What came back stunned me. 2 complaints had been filed against her for identity theft in the past 5 years, both by former friends. Neither had pressed charges, likely pressured into silence with promises of repayment that probably never came. Melissa Johnson, her college roommate, had filed a police report 3 years ago claiming Heather had opened 3 credit cards in her name, totaling $12 0 debt. The report was later withdrawn. Another complaint came from Brianna Martinez, a former coworker, who alleged Heather had used her personal information to take out a $5 0 personal loan. Again, the complaint was withdrawn after 2 weeks. I found Brianna on social media and sent her a message explaining my situation. She responded within hours. I'm not surprised her message read, Heather convinced me she'd pay everything back if I dropped the charges. She made a few payments, then ghosted me. Richard threatened to sue me for defamation when I tried to pursue it again. I was going through a divorce and couldn't handle another legal battle. I'm still paying off that debt. With growing unease, I expanded my search to include Richard. His history showed a pattern of business deals gone wrong, angry investors, and multiple LLCs that were opened and shuttered within months. He'd been named in 2 lawsuits alleging fraud, both settled out of court with non-disclosure agreements. This wasn't just about a home renovation. Richard and Heather were drowning in debt, living far beyond their means, while creating the illusion of success. My parents finally agreed to meet me at a coffee shop after I threatened to go to their house. They arrived looking defensive, my father's arms crossed tightly over his chest. "This has gone far enough, Samantha," he began before I could even speak. "You need to stop these accusations." I placed a folder on the table between us. "These aren't accusations, Dad. These are facts." For the next 30 minutes, I methodically walked them through the evidence loan documents with Heather's forged signature, attempting to mimic mine, the contractor agreements for their home bank transfers, and the previous complaints against both Heather and Richard. My mother began to cry, silently, mascara tracking down her cheeks. My father's expression remained stony, but I could see uncertainty creeping into his eyes. Even if, and I'm not saying I believe all this, but even if some of this is true, my father said, "Finally, she's still your sister. She made a mistake." A mistake, I repeated incredulously. Dad, she stole my identity to fraudulently obtain $90,000. That's a felony. My mother reached across the table, grasping my hand. What do you want, Samantha? To send your own sister to jail? Is that going to solve anything? What I want is for her to admit what she did, cancel the renovation, return the money, and get professional help, I replied firmly. My father shook his head. The renovation is already underway. The money's been spent. Then she needs to take out a legitimate loan in her own name to pay this one off. You know they can't qualify with their credit, my mother said quietly. And then came the suggestion that left me breathless. You're doing well financially, my father said. You have that new promotion. Why not just take care of this, for the sake of family peace? We could all contribute a little each month to help you with the payments. I stared at them in disbelief. You want me to pay off a fraudulent loan that they took out in my name to reward their criminal behavior? We want you to be the bigger person, my mother said, squeezing my hand. That's who you've always been, Sam. The responsible one. The strong one. In that moment, I realized how completely they had bought into the dynamic that had defined our family for decades. Heather breaks the rules, and everyone else adjusts to accommodate her. I was expected to clean up her mess just as I always had, but on a scale that would financially devastate me for years. I can't do that, I said, pulling my hand away. And I'm shocked you would even ask. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with messages from cousins and family friends, all variations on the same theme. How could you make up such horrible lies about your sister? Heather is devastated by your jealousy. You need help, Sam. The campaign against me was in full swing. Heather had even posted on Facebook about struggling with a family member's mental health crisis without naming me directly. A post that received dozens of sympathetic comments and heart reactions. At work, I struggled to concentrate. My recent promotion had come with a major financial fraud investigation, but my mind kept drifting to my own case. My boss, Director Lauren Patterson, noticed my distraction during a team meeting. "Everything okay, Reynolds?" she asked as everyone else filed out. "Just some family issues," I replied vaguely. "Must be serious if it's affecting your work. You haven't been yourself for days." Her expression softened. "Take the afternoon off. Deal with whatever it is. I need you focused when you're here." As I packed up my laptop, I felt a wave of panic. My career, the one I'd worked so hard to build, was now at risk because of Heather's actions. The loan would affect my credit for years, potentially impacting my security clearance renewals. The family division was affecting my performance. Everything I valued was under threat. That night, I made a decision. I would not be a victim. Not of financial fraud, not of family manipulation, not of the dynamics that had defined us for decades. I would build a case so solid that neither Heather's tears nor Richard's threats could stand against it. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about breaking a lifelong pattern of enabling destructive behavior. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is to let them face the consequences of their actions. And sometimes, justice and family loyalty are not compatible values. I opened my laptop and began to build my case like I would for any financial crimes investigation, methodically, objectively, and with absolute attention to detail. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. At work, I maintained a facade of normalcy while investigating international money laundering operations. At home, I built a meticulous case against my own sister and brother-in-law. I created a secure digital vault for all evidence, organizing it chronologically and by type. Loan applications, credit reports, bank statements, text messages, previous complaints, financial histories, property records. Each piece of information added to the increasingly disturbing picture. Through property records, I discovered Heather and Richard's home had a second mortgage taken out 8 months ago, despite Heather telling the family they'd paid cash for their renovated pool and outdoor kitchen. Their property taxes were 2 payments behind, and a notice of default had been filed last month, the first step in the foreclosure process. Their financial situation was far worse than I had imagined. Credit card debt exceeding $120,000 spread across 15 cards. Auto loans on both their luxury vehicles were 3 months delinquent. A tax lien from the IRS for $42 unpaid taxes from Richard's self-reported consulting income. They weren't just living beyond their means. They were financially imploding while maintaining an Instagram-perfect facade. 2 previous loans had already defaulted, one from Richard's former business partner and another from a private lender who had begun legal proceedings to recover the funds. The $90,000 loan in my name wasn't funding a casual renovation. It was a desperate attempt to keep up appearances while their financial house of cards collapsed. Most concerning was what I found in their text message exchanges recovered from that shared cloud account they hadn't bothered to secure properly. Richard had clearly pressured Heather into using my identity. "I don't want to do this to Sam," Heather had written. "Can't we try to get a loan some other way?" "We've tried everything else," Richard had responded. "The foreclosure filing goes public next week. Everyone will know we're broke. Your parents will know I failed. Is that what you want?" "No, but Sam has everything. The career, the condo, the perfect credit score. She can afford this. We're family. Family helps family. She'd want to help if she knew how bad things are. Then let's just tell her the truth. And admit we've been lying about our finances for years, that your business genius husband is a failure. She'll judge us. You know how self-righteous she can be." There were dozens of similar exchanges showing Richard's manipulative tactics and Heather's wavering resistance that eventually crumbled. Richard had crafted the entire scheme coaching Heather on how to forge my signature and what to wear for the video closing. He'd even created a fake email trail showing my approval of the loan to cover their tracks. As devastating as these discoveries were, they left me with a difficult decision. Did I want to pursue criminal charges against my own sister? Would reporting her to law enforcement repair the damage or just deepen the family rift? Was there any way to hold them accountable while still leaving room for eventual reconciliation? I decided to make one final attempt at resolution before involving the authorities. I drafted an email to Heather. "I have comprehensive evidence of the loan fraud, including your text messages with Richard planning it. I know about the foreclosure, the tax lien, and the other defaulted loans. I'm prepared to file criminal charges for identity theft and loan fraud, but I'm offering you one chance to make this right. Meet me tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Westlake Park to discuss terms for resolving this without police involvement. Come alone." Her response came 3 hours later. "I don't respond to threats. You've always been jealous of my life, my marriage, my happiness. Now you're fabricating evidence because you can't stand that Richard and I have everything you don't. If you continue spreading lies about us, our lawyer will file for a restraining order and sue you for defamation. Get help, Sam. I'm genuinely worried about your mental state." Attached was a formal cease and desist letter from their attorney Jeffrey Wilson threatening legal action if I continued making false and defamatory statements about Heather and Richard Reynolds. That night, I discovered something that removed any remaining hesitation. A bank alert notified me of a large pending transaction against the fraudulent loan. I accessed the account details to find they had already spent over $50,000 on imported fixtures, custom cabinetry, and a $12,000 design consultation fee paid directly to Richard's newest LLC established just days after the loan funding. They had no intention of making this right. They were accelerating their spending to use up the funds before I could stop them. The next morning, I walked into the local police station with my carefully organized evidence and filed a formal identity theft report. The detective assigned to my case, Karen Mitchell, reviewed my documentation with increasing interest. "This is the most thorough initial report I've ever seen," she remarked. "Most victims bring us bank statements and tears." "I do this for a living," I replied. "Just not usually when it's my own identity that's been stolen." "And you're certain you want to pursue charges? This would mean criminal prosecution of your sister." I thought about my parents' faces, the family discord, and the inevitable holiday dinners that would never happen again. Then I thought about Heather and Richard's other victims, and how my silence would only enable them to harm others. "Yes," I said firmly. "I want to pursue all available charges." As I signed the formal complaint, I felt a complex mixture of grief and relief. The system I had dedicated my career to upholding would now determine my sister's fate. Justice would be served, but at what personal cost? The police moved with surprising speed. Within 48 hours of filing my report, Detective Mitchell called to inform me they had executed a search warrant at Heather and Richard's home, seizing computers, phones, and financial documents. The Atlantic Coastal Bank had frozen the remaining loan funds upon receiving the fraud notification. What followed was nuclear fallout within my family. My phone exploded with notifications. Voicemails from my sobbing mother. "How could you do this to your own sister? They handcuffed her in front of the neighbors." Text messages from my father vacillating between rage and pleading. "You've destroyed this family." Followed by, "Please drop the charges, we can work this out privately." My social media accounts became battlegrounds. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years posted public denunciations of my cruel betrayal. Aunt Patricia, always close to my mother, wrote a lengthy Facebook post about toxic family members who care more about money than blood ties without naming me directly. My brother-in-law's sister Megan created a family group chat explicitly excluding me, where they discussed the false accusations and legal defense fund for Heather and Richard. Someone leaked screenshots to me showing my parents actively participating in these discussions. The most painful message came from my father: "If you don't drop these charges immediately, don't consider yourself part of this family anymore. Your mother can't even get out of bed because of what you've done." I sat alone in my condo, surrounded by the evidence of my sister's betrayal, feeling like I was the one being punished. For the first time, I questioned my decision. Was justice worth losing my entire family? Would Heather have eventually made things right if I'd given her more chances? Then my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Samantha, it's Jennifer, your mom's sister." Aunt Jennifer had always been the family outsider, having moved to Oregon 20 years ago after a falling out with my mother that was never fully explained to us kids. "I heard what's happening," she said. "Your cousin Emma still keeps me in the loop, though your mother would hate knowing that." "I guess you're calling to tell me how terrible I am too," I asked wearily. "Actually, I'm calling to tell you I'm proud of you." I nearly dropped the phone. "What?" "Standing up to family manipulation takes extraordinary courage," she continued. "Especially in our family, where keeping up appearances has always mattered more than honest confrontation." For the next hour, Jennifer shared insights about our family dynamics that put my childhood in a new light. The pattern of enabling Heather wasn't new. My mother had always been protected from consequences growing up, while my grandparents demanded perfection from my Aunt Jennifer. "Your mother repeated the pattern with you girls," Jennifer explained. "Heather could do no wrong while you were expected to be the responsible one, the achiever, the fixer. It's toxic, and it's exactly why I had to distance myself years ago." As we talked, my email pinged with a message from Emma Jennifer's daughter. Attached were screenshots from a private conversation where several family members were questioning Heather's version of events. "Not everyone believes her story," Emma wrote. Some of us remember her borrowing money and never repaying it, or the drama when Grandma's jewelry disappeared after Heather visited. People are starting to ask questions. Then Jennifer shared the bombshell. Did you know Heather took out credit cards in your grandmother's name 3 years ago? After your grandfather died? What? No, I never heard about this. Your mother covered it up. Paid everything off to avoid a family scandal. About $20,000 worth of debt. Your grandmother never knew. Your mother told her the statements were errors and handled everything for her. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't Heather's first identity theft within the family. It was just the first time someone had refused to cover it up. Over the next few days, small cracks appeared in the family's united front against me. Uncle Robert called to ask for my side of the story, listening silently as I outlined the evidence. My cousin David, who worked in banking, texted, "If you have proof of what you're claiming, you were right to report it." Even my father's resolve seemed to waver. His messages shifted from demands to drop the charges to questions about the investigation process and what might happen to Heather. The most surprising support came from my grandmother, who called me directly despite my mother's efforts to shield her from the situation. "Your mother thinks I'm too fragile to handle family problems," she said, her voice strong despite her 84 years. "She told me you and your sister had a disagreement over money. Is that true?" I took a deep breath and told her everything, including what I'd learned about the credit cards in her name. A long silence followed. Then I always wondered about those strange calls from credit card companies. "Your mother insisted they were scammers." She paused. "You did the right thing, Samantha. In my day, we called it tough love. Sometimes it's the only kind that works." Despite these pockets of support, the family remained deeply divided. Thanksgiving was 6 weeks away, and the traditional gathering at my parents' home now seemed impossible. Years of holiday traditions, family rituals, and the comfort of belonging had been shattered by Heather's actions, and my refusal to quietly clean up her mess. The internal struggle was exhausting. Every supportive message reinforced my conviction that I'd done the right thing. Every angry call or text made me question whether justice was worth the price of family peace. I fluctuated between righteous certainty and crushing doubt multiple times each day. In my darkest moments, I wondered if I was punishing Heather not just for the identity theft, but for a lifetime of preferential treatment for the countless times I'd been held to higher standards while she charmed her way out of consequences. Was this really about justice? Or was it about finally forcing her to face what I had always had to face? Accountability. The questions haunted me, but they didn't change the facts. The evidence was irrefutable. The crime was serious. And enabling Heather further would only ensure she victimized someone else when she needed money again. So I stood firm, weathering the family storm, clinging to what support I could find, and reminding myself that sometimes doing the right thing feels anything but right. 3 weeks into the investigation, Heather and Richard launched a coordinated counterattack that caught me completely off guard. No longer content with turning family against me, they escalated to threatening my career and professional reputation. It began with an anonymous comment on the Treasury Department's public Facebook page, claiming a FinCEN employee was abusing government resources to pursue a personal vendetta against family members. Though it didn't name me directly, the implication was clear. The next day, my director Lauren called me into her office, her expression grave. "We received a formal complaint about you," she said, sliding a printed email across her desk. Normally, I'd dismiss this kind of thing immediately, but given the specificity of the allegations, I need to address it. The email sent from Richard's attorney alleged I had accessed restricted government databases to gather information for a personal dispute and was weaponizing federal resources against private citizens. It further claimed I had made threatening statements about using my position to ensure maximum penalties. None of that is true, I said firmly. I've been the victim of identity theft. I filed a police report like any citizen would. I've never accessed government resources for this case or made such threats. I believe you, Lauren said, but you know how this works. Any allegation of misuse of position requires a formal review. HR and legal will need statements, and the Inspector General's office has been notified as a matter of protocol. My stomach dropped. Even baseless allegations could derail a federal career. Security clearances, promotions, assignments, all could be affected by the mere existence of an investigation regardless of the outcome. I have documentation of the entire situation, I told her, and I've been extremely careful to keep my work and personal matters separate. Good. You'll need that for the review. In the meantime, you're on administrative duty. No active cases until this is cleared up. Being removed from my cases felt like a personal failure even though I'd done nothing wrong. I'd worked so hard for my recent promotion, and now I was shuffling paperwork while an investigation determined if I'd violated professional ethics. As I returned to my desk, I received a text from my colleague Mark. Just heard. Complete BS. Need any help? Mark and I had worked several major cases together. He knew my professional integrity and attention to detail. His message was followed by similar ones from other team members. Their support was touching, but it didn't erase the humiliation of being under investigation. That evening, as I updated my personal case file, I discovered something unexpected while reviewing the loan documents more carefully. Richard Reynolds wasn't just a random real estate developer with financial problems. His name had appeared in peripheral research for a money laundering case I'd worked on last year, a connection too tenuous to pursue at the time, but noteworthy in retrospect. I called Mark. I need a favor, but it has to be completely off the record. Name it, he replied, without hesitation. Can you look into any connections between Richard Reynolds and Meridian Properties or Ajax Investment Group? There was something in the Sanderson case last year, but I can't access the files now. 2 days later, Mark met me for coffee, sliding a napkin across the table with a single word written on it. Multiple. Can't share details while you're on admin duty, he murmured. But your brother-in-law has some interesting business associates. And this isn't his first identity fraud rodeo. What do you mean? Let's just say there's a pattern of using other people's information for financial transactions. Usually people close to him who won't press charges. The investigators on your case should be finding this too if they're doing their job properly. This information transformed my understanding of the situation. Richard wasn't just a desperate husband helping his wife commit fraud to maintain their lifestyle. He was a practiced financial criminal who had targeted his own sister-in-law, likely assuming family ties would prevent me from reporting him. I shared this development with Detective Mitchell, who promised to coordinate with financial crimes units that might have relevant information on Richard's past activities. A week later, Mitchell called with news. We've linked your brother-in-law to 3 other identity theft cases across 2 states. All involved family members or close friends who ultimately declined to press charges. But one victim provided extensive documentation before withdrawing her complaint. Let me guess. After threats of legal action for defamation? Exactly. Same attorney too, Jeffrey Wilson. Seems to be their standard playbook. They've been refining this scheme for years. As the investigation expanded, family pressure intensified. My mother left tearful voicemails claiming Heather was having panic attacks and might need hospitalization. My father switched tactics entirely, now suggesting I was being manipulated by overzealous police with quotas to fill. The situation took another turn when I received a formal letter from the Atlantic Coastal Bank. They had completed their internal fraud investigation and determined that their own protocols had been insufficiently followed during the loan approval process. Their fraud department had identified multiple red flags that loan officers had overlooked. The bank was formally removing my name from the loan and pursuing action against Heather and Richard independently. It was the first concrete victory in this ordeal, removing the immediate financial threat to my credit and financial future. The bank's documentation of their findings further strengthened the criminal case. That evening, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I checked the peephole, I was shocked to see my cousin Grace standing there looking nervous. "I shouldn't be here," she said when I opened the door. "But you need to know they're planning something." "What do you mean?" "Richard's been telling people you stole confidential information from work to frame them. He's gathering statements from family members willing to testify that you've always been jealous of Heather and unstable. They're trying to make this about your credibility, not their actions." "That's ridiculous," I said, though the knot in my stomach tightened. "There's documented evidence of the fraud." "I know. That's why I'm here. This isn't right what they're doing to you." She hesitated. "I've seen how Heather manipulates people. She borrowed money from me last year, said it was for medical bills. Then I saw her posting about her spa vacation that same week. By the time Grace left, I felt both validated and terrified. The case against Heather and Richard was growing stronger, but so was their determination to destroy me in the process. I called Detective Mitchell again. "I need to know, what happens if they succeed in making this about my credibility? If enough family members support their version of events?" "Financial crimes aren't he said, she said cases," she assured me. "We have documentation, bank records, digital evidence. Their character assassination attempts won't change the facts." The prosecutor is confident, Samantha. "This case is solid." As I hung up, I realized the investigation had evolved far beyond my initial identity theft complaint. Richard's pattern of fraudulent activity had caught the attention of multiple agencies. What began as a personal betrayal had uncovered something much larger and potentially more dangerous. That night I received an encrypted email from Mark, "Stay strong. You're not the only one building a case anymore." 6 weeks after filing my initial police report, everything changed in a single morning. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed with a news alert: local couple arrested in connection with identity theft ring. The accompanying photo showed Heather and Richard in handcuffs being escorted from their home by officers. Before I could process this, Detective Mitchell called. "Thought you'd want to hear it from me first. We executed arrest warrants this morning for multiple charges: identity theft, loan fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The investigation expanded significantly after we connected them to similar cases in Colorado and Oregon." My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. "What happened?" "Your case broke the pattern. Previous victims withdrew their complaints after family pressure or legal threats. You didn't. That gave us the opening to connect the dots between multiple cases. The FBI's involved now because of the interstate nature of their activities." I sat down heavily watching the news coverage replay the footage of my sister, hair disheveled, face tear-streaked, being placed in a police car. Despite everything, seeing her like this felt like a physical blow. "Are you okay?" Mitchell asked after my prolonged silence. I'm not sure, I answered honestly. I wanted justice, but seeing it happen is different than I expected. That's normal. Most people feel conflicted when family members face consequences, even when they initiated the process. Throughout the day, my phone lit up with messages from family members who had previously condemned me. My Aunt Patricia, who had been among the most vocal critics, just saw the news. "Is it true they did this to other people too, Cousin Emma? Everyone's talking about the arrests. Some people owe you an apology." Even my father sent a terse text, "We need to talk." The family narrative was shifting dramatically as details emerged about the scope of Heather and Richard's activities. News reports revealed they had allegedly defrauded at least 7 individuals over 3 years, primarily targeting family members and close friends. The estimated total exceeded $300,000. Most shocking to many was the revelation that they had been planning to flee the country. Police had discovered recently purchased one-way tickets to Belize scheduled for the following week, along with documents for a property purchase there. They had never intended to repay the fraudulent loans or face the consequences of their actions. My mother showed up at my door that evening looking smaller and older than I remembered. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice subdued. We sat in awkward silence before she finally spoke. I didn't want to believe it. It was easier to think you were overreacting than to accept that Heather could do something like this. I didn't want to believe it either, Mom. "The police called me today," they said. Her voice broke, they said. "Heather used my social security number too. For a credit card I knew nothing about. There's over $30,000 in debt." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm so sorry." "No, I'm sorry, Samantha. I should have listened to you. I should have." She dissolved into tears. I held my mother as she cried, feeling a complex mixture of vindication, sorrow, and exhaustion. The truth had finally emerged, but it brought little satisfaction. Only confirmation of how deeply dysfunctional our family dynamics had been. Over the next few days, the family began a painful process of reconciliation and truth-telling. Many apologized for doubting me. Some admitted they had also experienced financial manipulation from Heather, but had remained silent to keep the peace. Years of enabling behavior and denial were being confronted all at once. Not everyone came around. Some relatives maintained that I had betrayed family loyalty by involving law enforcement rather than handling things privately. My father struggled to accept Heather's guilt despite mounting evidence still searching for ways to excuse her behavior or shift blame to Richard's influence. She must have been coerced, he insisted, during a tense dinner at my parents' home. The Heather I raised wouldn't do this. "Dad, the evidence shows she's been doing this for years," I said gently. "To friends, to family, even to Grandma. At some point, we have to accept who she actually is, not who we want her to be." He left the table abruptly, unable to continue the conversation. My professional situation improved as the criminal case progressed. The Treasury Department's investigation cleared me of any wrongdoing, finding no evidence I had misused government resources or my position. I returned to active casework with an apology from the department and a letter of commendation for my professionalism during a difficult personal situation. 3 days after her arrest, I received a letter from Heather sent from the county detention center where she awaited arraignment. My hands shook as I opened the envelope, unsure what to expect. More manipulation threats, or perhaps genuine remorse. The letter was 3 pages long, written in Heather's familiar looping handwriting. "Sam, I don't know where to begin. I'm sorry. Seems inadequate for what I've done to you. I've been sitting in this cell for 3 days, finally facing the consequences of my actions with nowhere to hide and no one to blame. I've been thinking about why I did it. Not just to you, but to everyone. It wasn't desperation, though, that's what I told myself. It wasn't Richard's influence, though, that would be a convenient excuse. The truth is uglier. I did it because I've always gotten away with everything. Because I learned early that tears and charm could erase any mistake. Because no one ever forced me to face the reality of who I was becoming. Except you. You tried to help me see it again and again. I hated you for it. For your responsibility, your integrity, your stable life that you earned while I was taking shortcuts. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that for the first time in my life, I'm seeing myself clearly. It's a terrifying view. Heather. I read the letter 3 times, searching for manipulation or self-pity between the lines. It seemed different from her usual deflections. Raw, more self-aware, but I had been fooled by her apparent sincerity before. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Heather in a detention cell, about our parents struggling to reconcile their image of their daughter with her actions about the family gatherings that would never be the same. I had wanted justice, but I hadn't fully prepared myself for its aftermath. The turning point hadn't brought the closure I had expected. Instead, it had opened a new chapter of complex emotions and painful reckonings. Justice had been served, but healing the wounds in our family would be a much longer process, one without clear procedures or guaranteed outcomes. The criminal justice process moved forward with methodical precision. 3 weeks after their arrests, Heather and Richard appeared for their preliminary hearing. I sat in the back of the courtroom watching my sister in her orange jumpsuit, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup hiding her pallor. The prosecutor, Andrea Daniels, had prepared a strong case. The defendants engaged in a pattern of sophisticated identity theft targeting family members and close associates, she told the judge. Evidence shows multiple victims across 3 states with losses exceeding $300,000. Richard's attorney argued for separate trials, claiming Heather had been unduly influenced by her husband. The strategy was transparent. Richard trying to position Heather as another victim rather than an active participant. The judge denied the request, citing evidence of Heather's willing involvement in multiple frauds predating her relationship with Richard. After the hearing, Andrea approached me in the hallway. "The defense has reached out about a possible plea deal," she said. "They're finally realizing how strong our case is." "What kind of deal?" I asked. "For your sister, guilty plea to 1 count of identity theft and 1 count of wire fraud with other charges dropped. 2-year sentence with possibility of parole after 12 months plus full restitution to all victims." And Richard. His deal would be tougher. 5 years minimum given his role as the primary orchestrator and his previous suspended sentence in Colorado for similar charges. I struggled with mixed emotions. 2 years seemed both too harsh and too lenient simultaneously. I couldn't reconcile the sister I'd grown up with and the criminal who had systematically betrayed family trust. "They're offering restitution to all victims," I confirmed. "Yes, though, realistically, their assets won't cover the full amount immediately. The court would establish a payment plan, extending beyond their incarceration." "What happens if I oppose the deal?" Andrea's expression softened. "This isn't just about your case anymore, Samantha. We have multiple victims who deserve closure. A trial would be lengthy, expensive, and emotionally draining for everyone. The evidence is overwhelming. A plea agreement gives similar outcomes without putting victims through testimony and cross-examination." I nodded slowly. "I understand. I don't oppose the deal." 2 days later, I received another letter from Heather, this one briefer. "Sam, I've been offered a plea deal. Before I accept, I need to know if you can ever forgive me. Not now, maybe not for years, but someday. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need to know if it's possible. Richard is pressuring me to go to trial to fight the charges. He still thinks we can win or at least get a better deal. My lawyer says that's delusional given the evidence. For once in my life, I want to take responsibility instead of looking for escapes. But I'm scared, Sam. 2 years seems like forever." Heather. After considerable reflection, I requested a jail visit. Seeing Heather across the visitation room table, without makeup, jewelry, or her carefully cultivated image, was jarring. She looked simultaneously younger and older than her 31 years. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on her hands. "I got your letter," I replied. "About the plea deal." She nodded. "What do you think I should do?" "That's not for me to decide, Heather." "I know, but—" She looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. "You're the only person who's ever been honest with me. Everyone else just tells me what I want to hear." "The evidence is overwhelming," I said carefully. "Fighting the charges would likely result in a longer sentence." "That's what my lawyer says too." She wiped her eyes. "Richard still thinks we can win. He says family won't testify against family when it comes down to it." "Is that why you asked about forgiveness, to see if I'd testify?" "No," I asked, "because I need to know if there's anything left between us that's worth saving." She reached across the table, stopping short of touching my hand. "I've lost everything, Sam. My freedom, my reputation, probably my marriage once Richard realizes I'm taking the deal. I don't want to lose my sister too, even though I deserve to." I studied her face, searching for the manipulation I'd become so accustomed to seeing. Instead, I found something unfamiliar. Genuine remorse, unvarnished by charm or excuses. "I can't promise forgiveness right now," I said honestly. "You didn't just steal my identity, Heather. You tried to destroy my reputation and turn our entire family against me when I caught you. That kind of betrayal doesn't heal quickly." She nodded, fresh tears falling. "I understand." But I continued, "I don't want to close that door permanently either. Taking responsibility through this plea deal is a start. What happens after that depends on both of us." It wasn't the absolution she wanted, but it was the truth. The first step in whatever new relationship might eventually emerge from the wreckage of the old one. The following week, both Heather and Richard appeared in court to enter their pleas. Richard had ultimately accepted a deal as well, 5 years with possibility of parole after 3+ restitution. The difference in their demeanors was striking. Heather stood straight, answering the judge's questions clearly and accepting responsibility for her actions. Richard appeared resentful, his responses clipped and his body language defiant. My parents attended the plea hearing sitting beside me in a show of unified support. For me this time, not Heather. My mother gripped my hand tightly as Heather formally admitted to using my personal information to fraudulently obtain the loan. "We were so blind," my mother whispered, "for so many years." The judge accepted both plea agreements, scheduling sentencing for the following month. As Heather was led away, she looked back once, meeting my eyes with a gaze that held no manipulation, no charm, no performance, just raw acknowledgement of the reality we were both living. The sentencing hearing brought even more family members to the courthouse. The judge allowed victim impact statements, and 3 other people Heather and Richard had defrauded spoke about the financial and emotional damage they had suffered. When my turn came, I approached the podium with prepared remarks but set them aside at the last moment. "Your Honor, my sister betrayed my trust in the most personal way possible. She stole my identity, took out a fraudulent loan, and then tried to portray me as mentally unstable when I discovered her actions. The financial damage could have been devastating. The emotional damage within our family has been incalculable." I paused, looking at Heather, who met my gaze steadily despite her tears. "But I'm also standing here as someone who believes in the possibility of redemption. My sister's letter from jail was the first time in her adult life I've seen her take full responsibility for her actions without excuses or deflection. I hope her sentence provides appropriate consequences while also offering rehabilitation opportunities. She has a long journey ahead to rebuild trust with her family and make amends to all her victims." After all statements were heard, the judge formally sentenced them according to their plea agreements. Heather would serve her time at the Women's Correctional Facility in Marysville, while Richard would be transferred to the state prison in Monroe. As the courtroom cleared, family members clustered in small groups in the hallway, the tension of divided loyalties still evident despite the case's resolution. My parents stood awkwardly between groups torn between their daughter heading to prison and the daughter whose truth had finally been acknowledged. "What happens now?" my father asked, his expression lost and uncertain. "We start rebuilding," I replied. Not entirely sure what that would look like, but knowing it was necessary. One day at a time. 6 months after Heather began serving her sentence, I stood in the visitation room of Marysville Women's Correctional Facility, nervous, despite our previous visits. Our relationship was evolving through carefully monitored phone calls, letters, and monthly visits. Still fragile, but slowly finding a new foundation based on honesty rather than our lifelong patterns. "You cut your hair," Heather remarked as she sat across from me. The prison uniform washed out her complexion, but her eyes were clearer than I'd seen them in years. "Just last week," I replied, self-consciously touching the bob that had replaced my long waves. "Needed a change." "It suits you." She smiled tentatively. "Thanks for coming. I know it's a long drive." We settled into conversation more easily than our first awkward visits. Heather had enrolled in the prison's financial literacy program and was working toward a bookkeeping certificate. Irony's not lost on either of us. "How are Mom and Dad?" she asked, as she always did. "They're doing better. Dad finally started that retirement planning we've been pushing for years. Mom joined a support group for families of incarcerated people." Heather nodded. "And how about you? How's work?" "Good, actually. Really good. I got the Anderson case, which is huge. My boss says my personal experience with financial fraud has made me even more effective at the job." "Silver linings," Heather said wryly. "At least I contributed to your career advancement." The joke, the first either of us had made about the situation, surprised a laugh out of me. Perhaps gallows humor was a sign of healing. The road to this point had been neither straight nor easy. The family had fractured and reformed in new configurations after Heather and Richard's sentencing. Some relatives remained distant from me, still uncomfortable with my decision to press charges. Others had apologized profusely for doubting my claims, and now made extra efforts to include me in gatherings. My relationship with our parents had undergone the most profound transformation. After years of enabling Heather and holding me to different standards, they were confronting their own role in the family dynamics that had contributed to this outcome. Family therapy had become our monthly ritual, awkward and painful sessions where we unpacked decades of patterns and unspoken resentments. My mother had finally acknowledged how differently she had treated us, while my father struggled to reconcile his image of his little girl with the woman now serving time for multiple frauds. "Dad still sends me articles about early release programs," Heather confided during our visit. "He thinks I'm going to get out after a year. That seems unlikely given the multiple charges," I replied carefully. "I know. I told him that, but he doesn't want to hear it." She sighed. "I'm not looking for shortcuts this time, Sam. I need to serve my sentence, pay my debts, earn back trust. There's no easy way through this." Her words reflected the change I'd been cautiously observing over months of communication. Prison was providing something Heather had never experienced before: structured consequences and the inability to charm her way out of accountability. Richard, meanwhile, had filed for divorce 3 months into his sentence, claiming Heather had betrayed him by accepting a plea deal. His continued refusal to accept responsibility confirmed what the evidence had suggested. He had been the driving force behind their escalating frauds, but Heather had been a willing participant. My own healing process had taken unexpected turns. The promotion I'd feared losing had instead accelerated as my personal experience with identity theft enhanced my professional perspective. I'd been asked to develop training materials for financial institutions based on the security gaps identified in my case. I'd also started volunteering with a victim advocacy organization helping others navigate the complex aftermath of identity theft. Sharing my story helped transform a painful experience into something constructive, while connecting with other victims reassured me that my conflicted emotions were normal. My credit had been fully restored after the Atlantic Coastal Bank's fraud department completed their investigation. They had implemented new verification procedures based on the weaknesses exposed in my case. A small but meaningful improvement in the financial system I dedicated my career to protecting. "There's something I haven't told you," Heather said, interrupting my thoughts. "I've been writing to everyone I defrauded. Not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledging what I did and taking responsibility. That's significant," I replied, genuinely impressed. "It's part of the rehabilitation program, but I would have done it anyway. I need to face what I did." She hesitated. Some of them wrote back. Melissa Johnson, my old roommate, said she'd been carrying anger for years. Just having me admit what I did helped her let go of some of it. We talked until the visitation period ended, covering ground that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Honest discussions about her crimes, my feelings of betrayal, and the uncertain future of our relationship. There were still raw moments and difficult topics, but the conversation had an authenticity that had always been missing. As I drove home afterward, I reflected on the lessons of the past year. I had learned that family loyalty shouldn't require sacrificing personal boundaries or enabling destructive behavior. That sometimes true compassion means allowing natural consequences rather than protecting someone from them. That healing doesn't mean forgetting or excusing, but finding a way forward that honors both the pain and the possibility of growth. At home, I found an email from Detective Mitchell, who had kept in touch throughout the case and after. She had successfully connected 2 other identity theft victims with evidence related to Richard's earlier schemes, helping them resolve long-standing credit issues. "Your willingness to come forward broke an important pattern," she wrote. "Sometimes it takes one person standing firm to create the crack that brings down the whole facade." That night, I opened my journal, a practice recommended by my therapist to process the complex emotions of the past year. I wrote, "1 year ago today, I received a credit alert that changed everything. The sister I thought I knew vanished, replaced by someone capable of calculating betrayal. The family I thought would always support me fractured along lines of denial and uncomfortable truths. In the wreckage, I found something unexpected. A stronger sense of self, clearer boundaries, and relationships based on authenticity rather than obligation. I've discovered family members capable of growth and change when forced to confront reality. I've even glimpsed possibilities for a new relationship with Heather. Not based on the childhood bonds we've outgrown, but on the adults we're still becoming. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive what happened. Some betrayals leave permanent marks. But I'm no longer defined by victimhood or family patterns. Whatever comes next, with Heather, with our parents, with the extended family still navigating their own responses, I'll face it with the knowledge that standing up for myself was not just necessary, but transformative. I closed the journal and looked at the framed photo on my desk. Not a family portrait, but a picture of me at my FinCEN promotion ceremony, smiling with genuine pride. It represented the self I had fought to protect when it would have been easier to surrender to family pressure and manipulation. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought not against obvious enemies, but against the expectations and patterns that have shaped our understanding of love and loyalty. Sometimes true strength lies not in forgiveness at all costs, but in holding firm to your truth even when it would be easier to bend. And sometimes the family we need is not the one we're born into, but the one we build through conscious choices about who and what we value. Those were the lessons that would guide me forward whatever the future held. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family loyalty and your own well-being? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the only way forward. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that even the most painful experiences can become stepping stones to a stronger, more authentic life.